She walked away, not because she didn't care, but because she finally realized her worth. And that right there is the moment everything changed. That's when he turned around. That's when he noticed. That's when he started chasing. There's a certain power in detachment, not the cold kind, not the heartless, bitter withdrawal, but the quiet, confident kind, the kind that whispers, I love myself enough to let go. That kind of detachment men can't resist because it's magnetic. It doesn't demand, it simply is. You see, the moment a woman no longer needs validation from a man, she becomes a force he can't ignore. Because detachment isn't about playing games. It's not manipulation, it's mastery. The mastery of self, the deep knowing that you are whole, complete, and valuable with or without him. And that's rare. That's the kind of woman who walks into a room and changes the atmosphere without saying a word. When a woman detaches, she reclaims her energy. She stops chasing breadcrumbs and starts baking her own bread. She stops hoping for a text and starts living her life. And suddenly, the very man who once took her for granted begins to wonder, where did she go? But it's not just her absence he feels. It's her power. Men don't chase drama. They chase peace. And a detached woman is peace. She doesn't react. She responds. She doesn't cling. She chooses. She doesn't cry for attention. She commands respect because she understands the most powerful currency she holds is her attention. And she gives it wisely. Detachment is often misunderstood. People assume it means shutting down, being cold, or not caring. But the kind of detachment that makes a woman powerful and irresistible is not rooted in bitterness or ego. It's rooted in love for herself. It's about choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-worth over desperation. This form of detachment doesn't scream or demand. It whispers confidently, I know what I bring to the table, and I'm no longer staying where I'm not valued. That's not weakness, that's strength, that's wisdom. When a woman detaches, she's not giving up on love, she's giving up on being treated like she's optional. She no longer waits for breadcrumbs of attention or inconsistent affection. She no longer holds on to potential while her soul is starving for peace. Instead, she makes the decision to choose herself, even if it means walking away from something or someone she once deeply wanted. That choice is not easy, it's painful, but it's sacred because it means she's finally honoring her own value. This kind of detachment isn't about playing hard to get. It's not a tactic, it's a transformation. It's the moment a woman shifts her focus from proving her worth to protecting it. She no longer gives her energy to someone who doesn't reciprocate it. She stops explaining herself, stops overextending, and stops tolerating the bare minimum. That shift is powerful because it sends a clear message. I am not afraid to be alone. I am afraid of staying where I'm not respected. And what happens next is magnetic. The very energy she once poured into chasing is now being redirected into building herself, her peace, her purpose. And that shift doesn't go unnoticed. Men sense it. It's in her posture, her presence, her peace. She's no longer reactive. She's no longer checking her phone in anticipation. She's not moved by silence or mixed signals because she's not playing the game anymore. She's not even on the field. She's moved into a new league entirely, one where her value isn't questioned, it's known. The power in detachment lies in this truth. When a woman no longer needs someone to feel complete, she becomes whole. And wholeness is attractive, not because it's unattainable, but because it's real. It's rare. It tells the world she has learned to love herself enough to walk away from anything that doesn't honor her soul. That's not just detachment, that's liberation. And liberation is something no one can ignore, especially not a man who once had access to her and now realizes that access must be earned. Self-worth is a woman's greatest superpower, and when she finally steps into it, everything changes, including how men see her. woman who recognizes her value no longer operates from a place of lack or need. She stops chasing, pleading, or trying to prove herself. She no longer believes she has to earn love by shrinking herself or tolerating less than she deserves. That shift is powerful because it's rare. Most people are conditioned to seek external validation, but a woman rooted in self-worth becomes internally anchored. She knows who she is, and that energy becomes undeniable. Men are instinctively drawn to women who are whole, not because she's playing games or acting like she doesn't care, but because she genuinely doesn't need anyone to complete her. Her worth isn't dependent on his attention. It's not waiting for his approval. It's already established deep within her. That kind of confidence radiates without her having to say a word. It's in her walk, her tone, her silence, and her boundaries. And that's what makes her magnetic. Men can't resist a woman who is no longer seeking their validation because she's already approved of herself. The moment a woman stops tying her value to whether a man chooses her, she begins to shine in a different way. She doesn't act out of desperation or fear of abandonment. Instead, she operates from a place of calm certainty. She knows that anyone who doesn't see her worth simply doesn't belong in her life. That clarity creates space for the right kind of energy, the right kind of love, the right kind of man. A man who sees her as a partner, not a project. A man who respects her strength instead of testing her boundaries. This self-worth doesn't come from ego, it comes from experience, from pain, from choosing herself after being overlooked or undervalued. And when she finally claims it, she becomes someone men can't ignore because she's no longer available for confusion. She's no longer trying to convince someone to stay. She's living her life, walking in purpose and pouring into herself. That independence doesn't push men away. It attracts the ones who are ready, the ones who want a woman, not a girl, a queen, not a placeholder, a partner, not a puppet. Men notice when a woman levels up. They notice when her glow comes from within, not from their attention. And it forces them to reflect, what am I bringing to her world? Because now it's not about being chosen. It's about being worthy of her choosing. And when a woman reaches that point, she stops being an option. She becomes the standard. Silence and distance can be louder than words. When a woman detaches and begins to withdraw her energy, she doesn't need to make a dramatic exit or deliver an emotional speech. Her absence says everything. The man who once had access to her thoughts, her time, and her affection suddenly finds himself sitting in the quiet she leaves behind. And that silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning. It speaks of boundaries, self-respect, and the realization that she no longer has the emotional bandwidth to invest in someone who isn't consistent. A woman who chooses distance isn't trying to punish anyone. She's protecting her peace. She's no longer willing to engage in cycles that drain her. The silence she offers isn't out of malice. It's a decision to stop explaining, stop arguing, stop overcompensating. She no longer reacts to breadcrumbs or manipulative games. She no longer sends long texts trying to be understood. She simply stops talking. And in that stillness, her power becomes undeniable. Men feel it. Even if they act unbothered, even if they pretend they've moved on, they notice the difference. When a woman who once showed up with love and energy suddenly stops, they notice when she doesn't check in, when she doesn't ask where they've been, when she no longer engages in emotional tug of war. Her silence is like a mirror, forcing them to confront what they've lost. It's not the noise that they miss. It's the presence, the access. The energy that once surrounded them, now gone, and in its place is a vacancy that echoes louder than any word she could have spoken. And the distance, that's where the transformation happens. That space she creates isn't just about cutting someone off. It's about filling that space with herself, her goals, her healing, her joy. She's no longer trying to close the gap between her and someone who is never meeting her halfway. She's using the space to grow, to realign, to remember who she was before she started shrinking to fit into someone else's life. Ironically, that silence and distance are often what make a man wake up, not because she tried to make him jealous or manipulate him, but because she finally stepped out of the dynamic entirely. And when he feels that shift, it unsettles him. It makes him realize she was the steady presence he didn't fully appreciate. That the conversations, the warmth, the love she gave weren't guaranteed. Now she's moved into a place where peace is more important than proximity, and that makes her more powerful than ever. Her silence is strength. Her distance is healing. And together, they create a version of her that can't be toyed with. She's no longer emotionally entangled. She's focused, grounded, and whole. And in that state, she becomes the woman he thinks about when the noise fades and he realizes what he lost in the quiet. Men are not challenged by desperation. They're drawn to standards. A woman who knows her worth and refuses to settle becomes a mirror that reflects a man's true intentions. She doesn't chase, she doesn't beg, and she doesn't compromise her values just to be chosen. She stands in her truth, and in doing so, she naturally challenges a man to rise to meet her level or fall away. That challenge isn't aggressive, it's quiet and unwavering. It's the unspoken expectation that if a man wants to be in her life, he must come correct, because her energy is not available for anything less. Standards are not walls to keep love out, they're gates to protect it. When a woman sets boundaries and expectations, she's not being difficult, she's being wise. She's learned, often through pain, that lowering her standards to accommodate someone else never leads to peace. So instead, she decides to hold the line. She becomes clear on what she will and won't tolerate, not because she thinks she's better than anyone else, but because she finally understands that love without respect is not love at all. This is what separates her from the rest. While others might tolerate inconsistency, she doesn't. While others might settle for attention without effort, she requires intentionality. And it's that unwavering commitment to her own self-worth that becomes magnetic. Men notice when a woman isn't easily impressed. They sense that she's not moved by empty words, only by real actions. And that makes her presence valuable because she doesn't need a man. She desires a healthy connection. And there's a difference. Some men are intimidated by that. They're used to being idolized, not evaluated. They're used to women bending to fit their lives, not asking them to show up with maturity and purpose. But the right man won't be discouraged by her standards. He'll be inspired by them. He'll see her as a woman of depth and strength, someone who challenges him to be better, to grow, to lead, to love with integrity. She becomes the kind of woman he doesn't just want. She becomes the kind of woman he respects. The truth is, a woman who holds high standards might not attract everyone, but she will attract the right one. And in the meantime, she's not waiting around. She's building herself. She's living fully. She's content in her own company because she knows that her peace is worth more than any relationship built on compromise and confusion. Her standards are not negotiable. They are rooted in self-love, and that kind of energy cannot be faked or fabricated. So when a man sees that she cannot be won over by charm alone, when he realizes she requires consistency, honesty, and effort, he has a choice: level up or step aside. And if he chooses to rise, it's not out of pressure, but out of genuine desire to meet the kind of woman who doesn't just offer love, she offers a standard. And that is irresistible. Healing doesn't begin when the other person changes. It begins the moment a woman stops waiting, when she finally releases the hope that he'll become who she imagined, when she lets go of the fantasy and chooses reality. Something powerful shifts inside her. She no longer clings to the idea that love means suffering or that patience means tolerating emotional neglect. Instead, she turns inward. She starts to see that healing isn't found in another chance or another conversation. It's found in detachment, in choosing herself, in walking away from what keeps breaking her spirit. A woman who stops waiting for effort, clarity, or change begins to heal because she's no longer placing her emotional well-being in someone else's hands. She's no longer checking her phone, hoping for an apology, or planning her days around his attention. She stopped sacrificing her peace for the sake of potential. And in that stillness, in that moment where she's finally alone with her own heart, she begins to remember who she was before she forgot herself for someone else. That remembrance is where the healing begins. It's not easy. There are days when she'll still miss him, days when her mind replays the good moments and tries to convince her to go back. But now she's different. She's awake. She sees clearly. She understands that love doesn't have to be confusing, that a connection that constantly hurts is not her destiny, that her future is not built on waiting for someone to see her worth. It's built on her seeing it herself. And once that clicks, there's no turning back. She no longer begs. She no longer bargains. She no longer sacrifices her needs just to keep a man around. Now, she heals in her silence, in her solitude, in her self-care. Her healing doesn't look like revenge or bitterness. It looks like peace, like new routines, like pouring into her goals, like smiling again for no reason. The kind of healing that comes from detachment is deep. It's the kind that lasts because it's not dependent on the actions of others. It's fueled by the decision to finally prioritize her own soul. She no longer waits for closure from him. She becomes her own closure by choosing to move forward. This is when everything starts to change. Her energy shifts, her light returns, people around her notice it, even the man she walked away from feels it. That subtle confidence, that grounded presence. She's no longer emotionally tangled up in a relationship that left her drained. She's walking taller, laughing louder, living freer. Because healing has taught her that love should never cost her sanity, her sleep, or her self-worth. And perhaps the most beautiful part, she starts to realize she never needed him to be okay. She needed space to remember who she was, to restore herself, to build a life so full and rich that love becomes a bonus, not a necessity. That's the gift of detachment. It doesn't just create distance from him, it creates room for her, room to breathe, room to grow, room to heal. And that healing, that peace, that inner freedom, it becomes the most attractive thing about her because now she's not looking for love to save her. She's becoming the love she needed all along. There comes a point when a woman stops trying to be enough for someone who never truly saw her. She stops auditioning for love, stops performing for attention, and stops contorting herself just to fit into someone else's life. She realizes that she is not made to beg, to chase, or to constantly prove her worth. Instead, she decides to become the prize, not in a prideful or arrogant way, but in a deep, unshakable awareness that her presence, her love, her energy, it's valuable. And from that moment on, she no longer tries to convince anyone to choose her. She chooses herself. A woman who becomes the prize doesn't need to announce it. Her energy speaks for itself. She no longer runs after anyone who walks away. She doesn't stalk social media or replay conversations in her mind, wondering what she could have done differently. She no longer asks why he changed or what she did wrong. That version of her, the one who doubted, who questioned, who overgave, is gone. What remains is someone rooted, grounded, at peace, because she understands now that real love doesn't require her to lose herself. Men notice this shift. They may not say it, but they feel it. She carries herself differently. There's a calm in her, a quiet strength. She no longer jumps at every text or rearranges her life for someone who offers the bare minimum. She's not playing hard to get. She is hard to forget because there's something powerful about a woman who knows her worth and walks in it daily. She no longer hopes to be picked. She knows she's the blessing, and she treats herself accordingly. That changes the dynamic entirely. Now, if a man wants to be in her life, he must come with more than charm. He must come with consistency, with clarity, with effort. She no longer entertains confusion or excuses. She has no space for half love or almost relationships. Her time is reserved for people who match her energy, for a man who recognizes her depth, not just her beauty, for someone who sees her as a partner to build with, not a placeholder to pass time. She has elevated, and only those who are ready for something real can walk with her now. She becomes the prize because she no longer abandons herself to be loved. She's found joy in solitude, power in silence, and purpose in her journey. Her life is no longer defined by whether she's in a relationship. She's not desperate for attention because she gives herself what she once begged others for. And that is why men can't resist her, because her energy is rare. It's full of self-respect, self-love, and emotional maturity. In a world where so many are trying to be liked, she stands out by simply being whole. And the irony is, the more she detaches from needing validation, the more people are drawn to her. She shines without forcing it. She's soft without being weak, strong without being hardened. She's a woman who doesn't chase because she understands what she brings. She's not just another option. She's the standard. And that makes her unforgettable.